On a freezing winter night in 1997, investigative journalist Adam Nasser sat alone in his small apartment, living through the worst period of his career. Unpaid bills and unfinished reports covered his desk as snow fell outside his window. Just after midnight, someone knocked on his door. When Adam opened it, the hallway was empty. The only thing waiting for him was an old yellow envelope with no sender's name. He took it inside and carefully opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of an abandoned village hidden among mountains. In the corner of the photograph stood a tall figure with no visible face. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single sentence: "If you want to see true evil, go to the Valley of Shadows." At first, Adam believed it was a joke, but something about the photograph disturbed him. Unable to ignore the feeling, he packed his equipment and began his journey. After a long drive through isolated mountain roads, Adam finally arrived at a deserted dirt road ending at an old wooden sign that read, "Valley of Shadows." The sun was setting, and the cold had become unnatural. He entered the village. There was nobody there. The houses stood open, their windows shattered, and their doors moving slightly in the freezing air. He checked his phone, but there was no signal. As darkness fell, Adam chose an abandoned house to spend the night. At exactly 2:17 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy. One step, then another, then another. He grabbed his flashlight and looked outside the window, but the street was empty. The footsteps continued. Then suddenly, a voice whispered directly behind him, "Why did you come?" Adam turned around in terror, but nobody was there. The footsteps stopped. The next morning, Adam explored the village and discovered an abandoned school. Dust covered everything. Children's drawings still hung on the walls. In one classroom, he found an old diary. The final pages were written with trembling handwriting. Day 1, we saw it near the forest. Day 3, it started copying our voices. Day 6, do not look at its face. Day 7, it's too late. Fear slowly began to consume him. That night, Adam placed his camera in the center of the village square and hid inside a nearby house. Hours passed. Then he heard children laughing, a woman crying, someone screaming. Then he heard his own voice calling his name. Adam. He remained hidden until sunrise. The next morning, he reviewed the footage. At first, everything looked normal. Then he saw it. Behind him stood something impossible. A figure so tall it barely looked human. It had remained there for the entire night without moving. It had only watched him. The following night, Adam saw the creature with his own eyes. It stood at the end of the street. It stood at the end of the street, more than 3 meters tall. Its limbs were unnaturally long. Its skin was pale and stretched tightly over its body. Its face was not a face at all, but an endless black void. The creature began walking toward him, slowly, one step at a time. Adam froze. Every instinct in his body told him to run, but for a moment, he couldn't move. The creature continued approaching. It never hurried. It never changed its pace. Yet with every step, it seemed impossibly closer. Finally, Adam turned and ran. He ran through the abandoned streets, past broken houses and dead trees, his breath turning into clouds in the freezing air. Behind him, the footsteps continued, slow, heavy, constant. He looked back. The creature was still there, walking, never running. Yet somehow it remained the same distance behind him. Adam ran until his lungs burned. Eventually, he stumbled into an abandoned house and slammed the door behind him. He pressed himself against the wall, trying to remain silent. Then he looked through the window, and that's when he saw them. Figures standing behind the windows of every house in the village. Human-shaped shadows. They didn't move. They only watched. Slowly, their voices began to whisper. Don't let it see you. Don't let it see you. Don't let it see you. Adam stepped backward in horror. He finally understood. The villagers had never disappeared. They had become shadows. The footsteps outside stopped. Silence filled the room. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, he heard breathing. Not his own. Adam burst through the back door and ran once again. He ran toward the old church standing at the edge of the village. The doors creaked open as he entered. Moonlight shone through broken stained glass windows. Dust covered everything. On the altar lay a single piece of paper. With shaking hands, Adam picked it up. The message read, "It does not seek the body. It seeks fear, and if it comes close enough, you will never leave." Suddenly, the church doors slammed shut. The footsteps returned. Slow, heavy, closer. Adam rushed toward a broken side entrance and escaped back into the village. But something had changed. The streets no longer looked the same. Buildings shifted, roads twisted. Every direction led back to where he had started. Reality itself was collapsing. Exhausted, terrified, and completely lost, Adam finally stopped running. The creature stood before him, towering over him, silent. Its endless black face seemed to swallow the darkness around it. Then it spoke. Its voice sounded like hundreds of voices speaking at once. "You did not come here." The world fell silent. Then it spoke again. "I brought you." Everything went black. 2 weeks later, a search team discovered Adam's camera near the mountains surrounding the Valley of Shadows. Adam himself was never found. Most of the recordings had been destroyed, except one. In the final video, Adam sat alone in complete darkness. He smiled, but it wasn't his smile. His eyes were empty. He stared directly into the camera. Then he spoke. "It found me." His smile grew wider, and now the image began to distort. Static filled the screen. Then his final words were heard. "It will find you too." The recording ended. The screen went black forever. 5 years had passed since the investigative journalist Adam Steve disappeared. The case had officially been closed, and most people believed that everything that happened was nothing more than an internet horror legend. However, one thing never disappeared: the final recording. In that recording, Adam was heard whispering, "He found me, and now he'll find you too." The video spread across horror forums around the world, and everyone who watched it at midnight claimed they heard slow footsteps coming from somewhere they couldn't identify. In a distant city, a young journalist named Layan Samer was working on a documentary about the world's most terrifying real-life legends. When she watched Adam's final recording for the first time, she noticed something no one had ever seen before. In the last second of the video, just before the screen went black, a faint reflection appeared in the camera lens. Adam was not alone. There was an impossibly tall figure standing behind him. Layan decided to travel to the abandoned village known as Shadow Valley. Everyone tried to stop her. Her colleagues warned her. Drivers refused to take her there. And even the people living nearby shut their doors when they heard the name Shadow Valley. But she refused to give up. She arrived at the edge of the village at sunset. The first thing she noticed was that the old sign no longer read Shadow Valley. Instead, it displayed a different message: "I have returned." She froze. A cold wind blew past her, and suddenly every sound disappeared. Even the wind itself became silent. Layan entered the village expecting to find only ruins. But the village was no longer abandoned. Lights glowed inside several houses, and human shadows moved behind the curtains. Feeling relieved, she ran to one of the houses and knocked on the door. No one answered. She knocked again. Then she heard the voice of an old man from behind the door asking, "Why did you come back?" Nervously, she replied, "I'm a journalist." Silence filled the air before the voice answered, "We were journalists too." Slowly, she stepped backward. When she opened the door herself, she found no one inside. The house was empty and covered in dust. Searching for answers, Layan entered the old town hall and discovered a basement filled with dozens of videotapes. Every tape carried the name of a missing person. She played the first tape. A terrified man appeared on the screen, crying in a dark room while repeating, "It's getting closer." Then a tall shadow appeared behind him, and the recording ended. She played another tape. A woman stared directly into the camera and whispered, "Don't look behind you." The screen went black. Another tape showed a child crying before suddenly ending. The hallway was long and dark. At the very end sat a person in an old chair. She slowly approached and stopped. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was Adam. He looked exactly the same as he had 5 years earlier. He had not aged. He had not changed. He sat silently, staring at the floor. Layan whispered, "Adam." Slowly, he raised his head. His eyes were no longer human. In a quiet voice, he said, "You should never have come." Suddenly, every light went out. When the lights returned, Layan was no longer inside the building. She stood in the middle of a strange street. She ran into another street, then another, and another. Every road looked identical. Every house looked exactly the same. Panic overwhelmed her as she continued running. But then she realized something far worse. She was not alone. At the end of every street stood the same tall figure. It never moved. It only watched. Every time she ran, it appeared again, closer and closer. Eventually, Layan found herself standing in front of the old church. She entered and discovered a giant ancient book opened to its final page. Trembling, she read the words written there. The silent entity is not a creature. It is a place. It does not live inside the village. The village lives inside it. Everyone who enters becomes part of it. The ground began to shake. Thousands of whispers surrounded her from every direction. Then the entity appeared. For the first time, it stood only one step away from her. It had no face, but somehow she knew it was smiling. Several months later, a search team discovered Layan's camera. It contained only one recording. Layan appeared on the screen, staring directly into the lens. Behind her stood dozens of human shadows. She smiled coldly and said, "We were wrong. The entity was never looking for us. It was looking for someone to watch this message." Then, she leaned closer to the camera and whispered, "Did you hear the footsteps?" The recording ended. That same night, thousands of people around the world reported hearing slow footsteps inside their homes. Every witness described the same terrifying detail. The footsteps were getting closer.